But what I want to do is talk first a little bit, just frame what Enernoc is today, but then I want to go back and take you through our founding story. How did we launch Enernoc? You know, what did we do at the very beginning to get our company off the ground? What were our challenges? And I'll take us through it in sort of a fun way that I hope will resonate with many of you, because it's not a story of just an upward hockey stick, even though when you look at it, you know, we did go from nothing to IPO in about 5 years, and that's you know, relatively unheard of. But there were plenty of trials and tribulations along the way, and I'll take you through that. But what Enernoc is, first and foremost, our core business is something called demand response. And what demand response is a really interesting way to substitute or to obviate the need to build new peaking power plants. So what we do is we go to a utility like NSTAR or National Grid, or a utility like Pacific Gas and Electric out on the West Coast, and we say, rather than build another new peaking power plant that's going to spew countless amounts of emissions into the atmosphere, why don't you let our company take over and don't build that 100 megawatt power plant. We'll give you 100 megawatts of demand response, and what that means is when you send us a signal, Mr. Utility, we're going to shut off 100 megawatts worth of usage at 1,000 or 2,000 commercial, industrial, and institutional facilities throughout your territory. We're going to go to the hotels and the hospitals and the universities and the data center, and we're going to find some of their non-essential load, and we're going to wire it up to our network operations center, and we're going to be able to curtail that non-essential load at peak times so that it's the same to you. You don't care. You are eliminating demand to keep supply and demand in balance, as opposed to firing up new supply resources. It's clean, it's cost effective, it's putting money back into ratepayers' hands rather than putting it into a developer's hands who's going to build a new power plant on the landscape. And utilities happen to like that. They happen to like it, and obviously commercial industrial customers like it, and Enernoc likes it because we get a payment for providing that demand response resource to the utilities. And in fact, we sign contracts that are 10 and 15 years long for hundreds of millions of dollars with these utilities so that we can count on a recurring cash flow stream from these demand response payments, and then we put those payments into the hands of our commercial and industrial customers. We were you know, recently pointed out that we're the first profitable public smart grid company. So we're the first of our kind to be profitable and public. What I want to do is frame this discussion and take you all the way back and do this by the numbers, and you'll see how these numbers come into play. But let's start with the first number, which is 2001. And some key numbers in 2001 were 2, 32, and 29, as you see up on these slides. Well, first of all, 2001, I was at business school. I went to this little business school up in Hanover, New Hampshire. Dartmouth College has a little school, sometimes confused as a truck school. It's called the Tuck School of Business. And I met this guy, and the two of us were about 32 and 29 years of age, and it was 2001. We were in the middle of business school, and we said, the chances of us getting a job coming out of the other end of business school are slim to none, so we're not going to take that big of a risk, and we're dying to start a company in the energy management space. Let's do it. Why not? Well, number one, there was only two of us. Number two, we were 32 and 29 years old. His prior job was working as a park ranger in Central Park in New York City, and then he had done an internship somewhere. My prior experience had been, as was mentioned, I'd worked a little bit as a venture capital firm, so I was just dangerous enough to think I knew what the heck we were doing, and that we could raise some money. And I had just worked at a venture capital firm. Of course I could raise some money. I'll just go back to my venture capital firm and raise some money from them, and we'll get this business started. And this business, we called Enernoc, and we wrote a business plan, and we submitted that business plan to a couple of MBA competitions. And unfortunately, we couldn't even win the MBA competition in our MBA class at Dartmouth. We came in second, we think, but maybe it was third because there were only 3 of us, and we didn't win the top prize. We like to think we came in second because it makes us feel a little bit better. So we had a lot of work to do. We set out, and through our business school activity, we'd spend a lot of time in the evenings away from our families, locked in a room we had commandeered. Somehow we had gotten the key to this room, and we could use it privately up at Tuck. And our professors were pretty good. They let us do our thing, and sometimes they'd even let us miss class because we were telling them that we were going to a customer sales pitch and so on and so forth. But there was this one point in time where we were up in that room, and we took 2 whiteboards, and on the left side of the whiteboard we said strengths, and on the right side of the whiteboard we said weaknesses. And so we looked at the weaknesses and we said we have no technology, no customers, no product, no money, no teammates. And on the left side we wrote 2 passionate guys. Big market, big opportunity. And somehow we weren't daunted by the fact that the weaknesses were overwhelming and the strengths were simply an idea and a lot of passion, and the 2 of us that were going to continue to try to make sure that we boosted each other up along the way for this long, hard journey. Back to that venture capital firm. So I went back to my venture capital firm, but it was 2001, and I think we all remember what was happening in 2001. In 2001, the venture capital firms were reeling because there were a whole bunch of Tim Healy's and David Brewster's, David Brewster being my co-founder, that had just gotten funding in 1999 and 2000 and had blown through millions, hundreds of millions of venture capitalist money with the next pet store .com, sidewalk. I mean, there just were so many .com busts that were littered on the sides of the highway at that point, that when we marched in, 2 fresh-faced, about-to-be graduate MBA kids with very little experience, even my own former venture capital firm said, I don't know if this is going to fly with our LPs because, we're supposed to have learned our lesson over the last 2 or 3 years not to invest in guys like you with business plans that seem a little far-fetched. That was the nice stuff we got from the venture capitalists that told us we were crazy. There's one venture capitalist out west who, first he scared the hell out of us by saying, I just got off the phone with another team of entrepreneurs and we crammed them down so hard and we're going to make so much money in this and we don't even know if those entrepreneurs will be sticking around. And I'm going, geez, if that's his sales pitch, this guy's got a lot to learn. I don't know if I want to work with this guy. And then he told us that ours was the worst business plan he had seen in the last year, and we were just crazy to get started. That wasn't so hard to take because they're like, okay, he's got his opinion, he just doesn't like our business plan. My favorite was to go up the street here to, what is it, 850, 890, 900 Winter Street, and go into the venture capitalist's office because you could set up 5 or 6 meetings in a day. And you could walk from one venture capitalist across the hall to another venture capitalist. And my partner and I would take our business plan in and we'd take our pitch in, and we'd hear the first venture capitalist say, geez, that's a pretty interesting plan. I don't know that much about it, but I can tell you one thing I do know. The way you're going to need to be successful is you're going to need to have an indirect sales model. And I see you guys have a direct sales model. That's just not going to fly. We'd scribble down the notes. Geez, this is a really smart guy. He's built a lot of companies. And then we'd walk across the hall for the very next meeting, and we'd walk into the next venture capitalist meeting. He says, I don't know if I like your plan. I do like the fact that you're going direct to market because those indirect sales channels, those things never work. And we'd break that down, and we'd go back, and we'd be like, what are we going to do? Well, the next number on that list is 36. We got rejected 36 times by venture capitalists before we found anyone. And so we spent 2002 and 2003. It was like going to college all over again and being a single guy and just getting rejected by girl after girl after girl. I mean, you gotta really be confident that someone's gonna find you attractive, or who knows. But so the 37th venture capitalist. Some great guys out at Draper Fisher Jurvetson on the West Coast. Raj Atlaru, and Raj is someone who's asked me to speak because I think Raj is I think he's a charter member of TiE out in California. Or at least I know he's been involved in TiE an awful lot. And Raj had the foresight, and he said, "Look, we're DFJ, Draper Fisher Jurvetson. You're right in our sweet spot. You're right in our model. We invest in guys who basically, aren't bright enough or aren't experienced enough to know what they don't know or not know what they're supposed to know by this point, and they're willing to try different things, and they're willing to take a different approach and a different angle, and we're going to give you guys a shot. So we're going to give you a whopping $890,000 to start your company. And of course, we were looking for $4 or $5 million, but we took the $890,000 and turned that into several million dollars before the story was written. The next number on this list is the number 1. The number 1 was this mission that we set out immediately upon landing that venture capital money. And let me explain it to you, because I've explained it a few times before. The number 1 to us meant we wanted to be the number 1 portfolio company of our venture capitalists. That was our first goal. Just be the number 1 company in our venture capitalist portfolio. Why? Well, because it was a pretty reasonable goal to go after. I mean, yes, we were going to be competing with other entrepreneurial-minded companies in different sectors and different spaces, but it was something that we could glom onto, and we said, if we do that, then we're going to have access to more of this venture capitalist's capital. This venture capitalist is going to put us in front of other opportunities. They're going to help us sell. They're going to help us build this company. They're going to help us get new people on our team. They're going to spend more time with us because we're going to become their number 1 and their favorite. So our first goal was simply to become number 1 in our market, or in our venture capitalist portfolio. The second thing was that we had decided to become a demand response company. Now let me back up for a second. Interestingly enough, in 2001, if you had used the word demand response with David or me, we wouldn't have known what you were talking about. We didn't know what that term meant. And yet here we had this business plan to do energy management, and we didn't know what has now become our core business, which will do about $300 million worth of revenue in this year. We didn't even know what the term demand response meant in 2001 in our first business plan. So we set out to become, by this time that we had raised money, we'd finally figured out that there's this little application called demand response that seemed pretty interesting. It seemed like something we should get into. It seemed like something we could build a business around. And we said we also want to be the number 1 company in this little niche market called demand response. And if we could do that, then the third thing we'd try to become number 1 in would be the number 1 energy management company, and hopefully the number 1 company overall in the world at what we did. So we set these very systematic and step function type of goals. Well, I'd like to say that by 2010, we had definitely become our venture capitalists' number 1 portfolio company. I think the folks at DFJ, interestingly enough, we were their first IPO in 2007 since the dot-com crash of 2001. They hadn't had an IPO until Enernoc IPO'd, and that's Draper Fisher Jurvetson that has a long track record of huge success. So as of the last quarter, we had 6,300 megawatts under management. That's the equivalent of 63 peaking power plants. 63 peaking power plants, 100 megawatt power plants that take 2 to 3 years to build, that don't need to be built because of the fact that we have 6,300 megawatts of dispatchable demand response. About 4,000 demand response customers. I wouldn't be surprised if this hotel is a customer of ours. I know that the Marriott hotel chain, a number of other hotel chains are. I don't know if the Westin here is, but pretty much every grocery store you guys will shop in is a demand response customer of Enernoc. Most of the universities, all the different ski areas that we all might ski at in the wintertime are all demand response customers. It's really fun to walk into a facility or to walk up to a facility and know that that's probably a demand response customer of Enernoc. We've put well over half, yes, it's over $500 million back into commercial, industrial, and institutional customers' hands through the energy savings that we've unlocked, and by actually delivering a check to them for their demand response participation. And we have over 10,000 customer sites under management. So you do see a nice little hockey stick or a mountain of sorts in terms of some of the statistics. We work with all of our nation's wholesale competitive electricity markets, everyone from ISO New England here to the big grid operator in the Mid-Atlantic, PJM, and our utility customer base, which I remember walking into the first utility, Unitil, and Unitil's not on this list, but I remember them giving us a meeting, and 11 people came to it, and they said, "God, this is some good stuff. We'd really like to get involved." and you know, we're gonna do this as fast as we can. And about 11 months later, I heard back from him again, and I said, wow, this is going to be a hard business to start. But we have obviously done extremely well and persevered, even though we do operate under some very long sales cycles with utilities. And that's one of the things in this market, if you're dealing with utilities, you do have to plan for and expect. But when you do get in there, boy, they're good customers to work with. They're really good customers to work with. So let me go back to the last two numbers, because it frames the second half of my comments. Number 22 and the number 0.37, as in 37 cents. So in 2010, we'd been public for, since 2007, May of 2007. And lo and behold, in 2010, we hit our first year of profitability. And we achieved 37 cents of GAAP earnings per share. And 22, that other number up there, 22 analysts are covering us by this point. Now, I don't know how many analysts cover Microsoft. It's probably 20-something analysts. I don't know how many analysts cover their other small cap to mid cap companies, but 22 analysts is a lot of analysts to be covering us. And it's in part because so many banks recognize that there's an enormous opportunity in clean tech right now, enormous opportunity.